Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons for another Earthworks Podcast. Today, I have a dear friend who I think everybody in the turf industry should know. If you don't know him, I'd be shocked. Mr. Pat Jones is with us, and Pat is an icon of the turf industry. Gosh, Pat, I think I've known you almost as long as I've been in the turf industry. You and I grew up together. I think we were separated at birth and started about the late '80s, right? You got into this thing in the late '80s.
I'm sorry, what was your name again?
Yeah, that's what most people say when they talk to me.
Yes, yes, I have. We were just, kind of comparing notes on when we connected, but it was sometime around 88 to 90, somewhere in the States, both of us. But yeah, I started out working for GCSAA in 1987, purely by accident. Didn't know jack about turf, didn't know jack about golf, but I could write a little bit. And so I did that and kind of worked my way up through the program there, and ended up being the lobbyist and PR guy and fundraiser and all that stuff. But from then on, I kind of got into the magazine publishing business, and I started Golfdom magazine way back when, and I took over Golf Course Industry magazine, 12, 13 years ago, did that for a long time. And then 2 years ago, I decided to do something entirely different.
Something completely different,
which sort of didn't work out all that well. But it led me to what I'm doing now, which is being helpful to companies in the industry in terms of writing stuff and creating content for them and things like that. So it's great because I still get to do what I love to do, but it's really great because I don't have a P&L anymore, except for my own, right? I'm not managing a business for anybody anymore. And I really like the people I get to work with. So
yeah, but Pat, you're in your basement, for God's sake. I mean,
I love my basement.
You made it all the way to your basement, for God's sake. What is this? I see that. Yeah. Do they let you out, or they just throw sandwiches down and make you stay in there? I mean, nice little setup, though.
It puts the lotion in the bucket. Yeah.
There you go. You've actually been here at our office and helped us out a number of times. I mean, over the years, we've leaned on you, and I know a lot of people in the industry, certainly companies. But like I said, when I started this, I can't imagine there isn't a superintendent or a sports turf manager that doesn't know your name or probably seen you talk somewhere along the line. And you've certainly brought a lot of information, a lot of great stories to the turf industry. You've been sharing.
Oh, good. I'm sorry.
Exactly. Hey, I'm trying to be nice.
I know, you're good.
You've done a lot of stuff for guys out there, and you've certainly done a lot of stuff for people like us. And you've told a lot of stories over the years that I've loved. And I'm going to ask you to tell a few of those as we get through this.
Okay, sure.
But talk about the years at the GCSAA. I mean, did you have a degree in journalism, or were you doing, how did you even get into there?
Yeah, the short version is I was in law school. I went to law school for 2 years.
That explains everything.
And I quickly learned to hate and despise it. I didn't want to be a corporate lawyer. So I just kind of quit one day and I was looking for something to do, and I knew that there was this thing in Lawrence that had a magazine, and I applied there, and they unaccountably hired me.
Where were you at the time?
That was Lawrence, Kansas. So
you were living there.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I grew up there in Lawrence. So
I don't know if I knew that. I don't know that I knew you grew up in Lawrence.
I vaguely knew that there was this golf thing there.
Right.
I often give credit to Palmer Maples, who's a name that a lot of your listeners may know from down in Georgia. He's a past president of the GCSAA. He's a past president of the Carolinas and Georgia chapters, and it's just a legend. Well, for a brief time in the 80s, Palmer moved his entire family to Lawrence, Kansas to take over the GCSAA's education program and to make it largely what it became, right? He was a big factor in that.
Yeah.
So, and he gave up a lot. He could have worked at any club. He could have been superintendent at any club and back home, but he moved his entire family to Lawrence because it was the right thing to do. And I played football with his son, Chuck. So that's how I got to know that there was this thing there. So when I was there, when I got hired, it was in the middle of the sort of environmental criticism, the anti-pesticide stuff that was going on.
Early 90s, yeah.
Yep. I spent a lot of time arguing with Paul, the hell's his name? the radio guy, Paul
Harvey.
Paul
Harvey.
Harvey.
Paul Harvey.
And that was kind of a famous story too, where I had
I remember that actually.
Kind of intense confrontation with Mr. Harvey in front of a bunch of people at a press conference. And so anyway, it was a really interesting time because there was a lot of criticism about golf. But you know what happened? Golf responded.
Yeah.
Superintendents responded, and they said, "Oh, we don't want people to think like that about us, even if it's not true. We're worried about that perception." So what came out of that really awful time for golf, the criticism, was a new commitment to doing it right, and superintendents being superintendents wanting to do the right thing. So that was really great to see. And
that was actually right when we got in, and it was turmoil. I mean, it was think about it, for a company that does what we do, carbon-based fertility, and use the word organic. It was turmoil because people were thinking we're out there to bash pesticides, which we weren't at all. I mean, we can help people go down a different road and be a little bit more environmentally sound. But yeah, I mean, those years in this industry were crazy. I mean, to think about starting a company like ours in 1990 or in 88 or whenever it is we started, it's just nuts. But let's go back to one thing you said. You played football?
Yeah.
Shocking.
I did. Yes. In fact,
were you a golfer as a kid? Did you grow up?
No, not at all. I thought it was for pussies. I didn't want to.
You can't say that. I got to edit that out.
Well, it's a technical term. You can look it up.
Oh, okay.
No, it hadn't attracted me. We were poor. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So I was the third and kind of tag along kid of a single mom. Yeah. And so my mom had been divorced for years, and so we didn't have any money or anything. So golf wasn't an option.
Yeah, no, I know. It wasn't an easy
but yeah, I played football, and I actually went and walked on at KU my freshman year just to say that I did, and to get the practice jersey out of it. And I think I probably weighed about 200 pounds then, about 6 foot, and they just beat the daylights out of me. So I last my college football career lasted about a week and a half.
Not that I was trying to imply anything like that.
Literally, I was there to hold dummies. So yeah, I did okay. And then, believe it or not, I threw the shot put and the discus in high school. Yes, and I was not bad at it. I actually won some regional state stuff. But anyway, never mind. It's not the point. The point is I survived high school.
That's right. I read those books, all of them.
And went on to bigger things. But Lawrence, Kansas is a great town, and it's a great place to
I never knew that you were from Lawrence. I knew you worked there, but I never knew you grew up there. That's kind of funny.
But now, of course, I'm in my basement in Cleveland, Ohio. We've been in Cleveland for 20 plus years now, and like it a lot.
So without getting into any political issues with GCSAA, talk about those years when you were in that association. I mean, that was really their prime years in my mind. I mean, there was a lot of growth going on and a lot of good things going on. And I remember coming into this industry and thinking the world of this organization. And you were the first contact that I had with it. And it was, I mean, I was a punk kid and didn't know anything. So now look at us. I still have hair though.
I think the association has evolved amazingly well over the years. But if you want to look back, somebody that doesn't get enough credit for the contributions that they made is John Schilling. And John was the CEO of the organization from the 80s through the 80s and up into the early 90s when Steve Mona came in and took over. And John was not a perfect leader or anything, but they grew the trade show dramatically. Membership more than doubled in that time period. They built a revenue base and an education program for superintendents. So a lot of the things that we associate with GCSAA today were things that were started back then. And then along came Steve Mona and Joe O'Brien, who's another guy who doesn't get enough credit. And they really professionalized the organization. And Steve deserves endless credit for turning that organization into a truly professional association and not just kind of, we did a lot of things before they got there. We were in Singapore, we had an office in Singapore. We were trying to start an Asian trade show, all this other stuff, which was pure and simple money grab. But it was done with good intentions. So, it's definitely changed, but I see the GCSAA now. I like the way the board are in very much a leadership role in not managing the day-to-day operations of the association. And kudos to Red Evans for doing that.
I would agree with you there as well.
Very highly of Red.
I think you hit on something very important in that era, and those of us that have been around as long as you and I have been, we have definitely seen a significant change in the professionalism of the golf course superintendent. And I give a lot of credit to that organization for that. And it's important. I mean, not only have we brought in a level of professionalship among the ranks, but it's also helped bring up their recognition and their salaries. I mean, the whole industry has changed, I think, because of the focus that was put on the role of what these guys do. And as you know, and you would say the same thing 1,000 times, I've never seen a more professional group and a more dedicated group of people working as golf course superintendents.
And not making shit.
Exactly.
But it's way better than it used to be. And right now, this is an important point. We're at this point on the axis where salaries are going to go like this.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's already happening. And we can come back to this in a minute, but 40 years ago, 50 years ago, Paul Latshaw told a couple of clubs, if you want me, you're going to have to pay me. And every superintendent in America, and fairly globally, should kind of thank Paul.
Yes.
We think of him as this kind old guy. He was a tough bird.
Oh, yeah. I knew Paul well.
Yeah,
I've known Paul forever.
And Paul was the one that told him in Wilmington or wherever he was at. It was like, yeah, okay, I'll come there, but you're going to have to pay me, and redefine what salary expectations were for superintendents. And now we're seeing a whole another generation, I think, of people doing that. And it's going to be this interesting process as we churn the boomers out of the industry.
And we're not long for being out, but yeah.
Right. And we backfill them then with these up and comers, these aspiring top 500 elite superintendents. And that's a real sea change. It's a real sea change. And all you've got to do is look. Do you know what GuideStar is?
No, I don't.
GuideStar.org is a not-for-profit information database. And it lists all the not-for-profit
salaries. I do know, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So suddenly there's some light being shown on the real salaries of people in some of these elite clubs, and so you can begin to be well equipped when you go in and ask for what you deserve.
And a lot of the associations go around and ask for surveys, and it's for that purpose,
right.
So that we can get these guys compensated. I mean, they work. I mean, it's ridiculous the amount of hours that they work. And the thing that amazes me more than anything in this industry is that they do this because they care so much about their properties. Yeah. It's not a job. It's, this is my child. I'm responsible for this child here. And this is my property. And they might not get paid for a month. You've heard all those stories, but I'm not going to let my child go hungry, and it's just amazing. Let's talk about it. So salaries definitely started coming up in the 90s. Where are they now? And what does the next 10 years of salary look like in your mind? You've got your thumb on the pulse in the golf course superintendent's world.
They're going to go up. The question is how you can bring along the rest of your team with you, which is, I think, something that's top of mind with a lot of superintendents is how do I get a compensation structure put together now in 2021 where you can't hire people $15 an hour anymore? Yeah. How do we recreate our team with fewer people that are better paid and better qualified and better motivated?
Can that be done?
Yeah, I think it can. I think to some extent, but we've got to rely on a few things, like, for example, automation. Yeah. And I've been chirping about robot mowers for a long time. And, the MTD guys got pretty far down the line on the robot mower, the RG3. Well, that technology platform wasn't going to be viable in the future, so they stopped. But the important thing to recognize about that is that was for greens, and all great and super that they did that, but that's 3 acres.
3 acres, right? That only takes me an hour, for God's sake. Well,
right, maybe a few, but still. And it's something to some extent that you still want to have control of. Right. It's not too many superintendents were all that comfortable with letting Robbie the robot go out and mow their right. So, but some more, and I think more will be in the future. But short term is we've got to automate some of these things that are so simple that anybody could do them. Right. So automated fairway mowing. I've seen these little prototypes of what I call bunker Roombas, right?
Yeah.
Which you throw it in the bunker and it kind of rolls around.
Spins around for a while.
So some of that stuff's going to come, but also we're going to have to change some of the protocols. Well, are we really going to edge bunkers every 2 weeks? Are we going to, or, what ways can we find to reduce hand labor and things like that? So I come back to that stuff time and time again when I'm writing for my clients is how does this help to replace hand labor or offset it or whatever else. But back to your question about salaries. So yeah, GCSAA has been collecting that data for years, as have local CMAA. The club managers all kind of share that data. But I think it's damn well timed that good superintendents who are in the process of trying to go to that next level, they do their own research and they really find out. Don't rely on that stuff. And it's not particularly valuable. But look at GuideStar and some of there's at least one other site I think that are out there. So come prepared to make a case for your salary and for your assistant's salary.
I was just going to ask you that. Let me ask this question. I mean, the superintendent obviously is the highest paid on the team, but look at what's going on with assistants, and rightfully so. I don't
take one step back. Take one step back. I know a couple of places where the mechanic makes more than the superintendent.
As it probably should be in some cases.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
but that's a good point. I mean, I know guys in California that they can't get anybody for less than $22 an hour. Crew guys, kids out of high school, guys with a weed whacker in their hand. Thank goodness the assistant salaries are starting to get into real places, pushing $100,000 in a lot of places. But at some point, that bubble has to burst, and that's going to affect the superintendent. I mean, the whole package is. I mean, it just seems like it's a house of cards, right? With the cost of crew guys, and the bottom line is that this is still at the end of the day, it's a business. I mean, and that's how any business is run, is that, you generate revenue for your business, and then it's compensated through the team. And I mean, I don't know that a lot of clubs really play that way. They just think that, $12 an hour, $9 an hour for a kid that works 80 hours a week. Oh, that's a great deal, but don't pay him overtime.
Here's the thing. And this is something I have to remind myself to do constantly. There isn't one golf market. There are about 6. Okay. Yeah. There is the kind of what we're talking about here, the elite clubs, the higher end management company run courses, the Troon courses and things like that. You've got 5,000 clubs at the top, sort of, who have pretty good resources. Well, let's say we got 1,000 clubs at the top where money is no object. Okay. Right. And then the next 3,000 or 4,000 is we've got pretty good resources. We can kind of do what we want. And I think all of those viably can sort of look at doing some of these things we're talking about. But down from there, you got 5,000 courses in the middle that are struggling because there's still a lot of competition. There's still too many golf courses in their community. The ability of, let me say this nicely, the ability of general managers to screw up good clubs never ceases to amaze me, because too many of them are not well qualified. They're food and bev people. They used to be restaurant people, or they used to work at a hotel or something, and all of a sudden they're GM of Shady Acres Country Club and they don't know anything. Yeah. So, hey, let's spend $50,000 to buy new drapes for the clubhouse while our golf course is dying because
we can't afford a spray program.
Yeah, and then at the tail end of the market, and I'm not trying to demean this, because they're so important to communities and everything else, are these mom and pop clubs, and they're just little places. The pandemic was huge for them because cash flow. Yeah. Right? So a lot of things, right. So we've been closing 200 or 300 courses a year. Well, not quite that many, about 200 a year for the last 10, 12 years since the recession. And that slowed down a little bit last year. But honestly, some of those clubs still will close because they're worth more as real estate than they are as a golf course operation. And in many cases, you're looking at the second generation, maybe the third generation of family operating those things, and they don't want to have anything to do with working that hard.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think what you have to do is think about the different the different strata in the market. And bottom line, there's only two things that matter. There are the haves and there are the have-nots.
Yeah.
And the have-nots, it's a struggle every day. You know, it's not enough people, not enough money, not enough water, not enough fertilizer, not enough of anything. And they're the ones that just go in there and struggle every day, and they will never get the recognition they deserve. And they're getting paid $48,000 a year as a golf course superintendent, and it's unconscionable. But
go ahead. You and I see guys all the time, and the first thing I always get is, do you know anybody? I need an assistant. Or I don't know a golf course today that I have talked to recently that isn't 40% down in staff. You know, and like you said, like you started this, that's not going to change. I mean, we've had a number of conversations on the podcast about education or about labor, you know, lots of different things that affect this issue. But I don't see we're ever going to get back to that full level, you know, and something's got to break. I mean, we've got to figure out strategies that are going to allow us to do this job. I mean, we can't expect guys to be working 80 to 120 hours a week. It's just, in that generation, it's not going to happen, and it's not right. And they're not being compensated effectively for that. But, you know, there's got to be, you know, like you said, automation is part of it, better agronomics, where you can kind of go home and know that everything's not going to be dead in the morning. That's what we've been focused on for all these years. I mean, but there's got to be a change somehow. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel?
I think so, and that's this you know, change away from university degrees being the standard, which was something that didn't really happen until the mid 80s. You know, that about our time when we were coming in, or when I started at GCSAA in 1987, only 45% of superintendents had any degree at all.
Really, in the early 90s.
Been a sea change since then, right? So, and by the way, only and that doesn't even reflect the broader world, because only half of all clubs have a GCSA member, right? So there's 15,000 golf courses.
It's only half? Is that really the number? Oh, I didn't even know that.
It's like 40. I just asked somebody the other day, and it's like 48%.
Wow, that's
surprising. U.S. courses have a GCSA member of any kind. That might be.
I assume that's a decline. That's falling.
It's always been like that.
It's always been that way. Okay.
It's just been steady. It's sort of half the market. And usually what it comes down to is, will my boss pay for the membership, right? And at courses where they don't, you see almost no members. And at courses where they do, you see 100% membership. So it really does come down to whether or not they want to reach into their own pocket. Not that there aren't superintendents watching this right now who value their GCSA
and have done it
so much that they're paying for it. But for the most part,
no. But that makes sense. I'd never realized that, but that makes perfect sense.
So back to the sea change in how we educate golf course superintendents. So for the longest time, you know, the other thing is, back in in the 90s, there were more than 100 turf grass programs in the United States.
Oh yes, I know.
So not just not just land grant universities or Rutgers or places like that. It was every community college and
everybody couldn't throw a dead cat.
And now that's down to maybe 20 or 25. And a lot of them just said that. Mark,
that was one of my questions for you. Why are they gone? I mean, they're gone.
Because people. Here's the bottom line: is if my son decided he wanted to be a golf course superintendent at age 18, or my daughter wanted to be a golf course superintendent, which would be awesome, right? Yeah. And the question becomes, as a parent, do you let them spend $250,000 on an education at the Ohio State University or at the Michigan State University to have a job start with a starting salary of $36,000 a year, where you're going to work 90 hours a week?
What do psychologists make as a starting salary?
Yeah, well, I don't know. You would have to be psychologically unbalanced to agree that that's a good deal. So.
But the 2-year programs are what I was talking about. They're gone, and they weren't nearly as
failing too. They're failing too,
and there's not one. Is there even one on the West Coast right now?
I don't know.
I don't think there is. I might be wrong, and I'm sorry if I am.
Maybe College of the Desert out there.
Yeah.
And maybe UC Riverside has some kind of.
I think Riverside does have something.
Yeah, maybe, but again, a lot of these programs are down to 2, 3, 5 kids. I mean, I've done some Zoom training with kids at 4-year universities, and there's 5 kids in the program.
I got to Rutgers in '96, and we were turning kids away by the dozens, and we had 100 kids going through every year.
So that's what's changed. It's just nobody wants to pay that money to do it anymore.
And half of those guys were paid for by the club. The club paid for a lot of them.
And that's coming back. So, okay, so let's step forward. So what's happening now? Now we're going back to, I think, more of the traditional apprenticeship program. We're going to hire for talent, right? And we're going to try to identify who the most talented people are from that pool of hirees. And then we're going to coach them up. Yeah. And I hear the word coaching a lot from good superintendents that I work with, that we're constantly trying to coach them and bring them up to speed on not just the agronomy part that they would have learned in turf school, but people management, which is by far more important.
Which they don't learn in turf school, quite honestly.
Well, I think the turf schools, to their credit, have gotten better.
They have gotten better, but they're still not.
I love the fact that they make them do budgets now and things like that, and that's all great. But it still doesn't mitigate the fundamental problem of very few people want to go to a four-year college to do this anymore. The ones that do can write their own ticket. Okay. The ones that do that are John Comiskey interns or Ohio State interns or whatever, they are getting wined and dined by the best golf clubs in the world.
And they're getting paid fairly well once they get into that point of their life. And they're being
put up at a nice, I just was at Country Club of Detroit the other day, and they have a very nice facility for their interns to live. Yeah. And that's not unusual anymore. Matt Schaefer built that when he redid the facility at Marion. He built a bunch of space for people.
Billy did it out at the National. I mean, a beautiful facility.
Right. So I think what you're talking about though is okay, let's coach these up, let's get them going, and then let's send them to Rutgers, which a whole generation of superintendents came out of the Rutgers 2-year program.
Rutgers, Penn State, Michigan State.
The UMass,
UMass, absolutely.
So I think what you're going to see moving forward is some sort of a hybrid between 2-year programs and online learning, right? And so you've got Penn State out there doing this pretty well already.
Yep.
So if you've got somebody, a young woman who's really talented and you think is gonna really has the goods and the passion, then it's back to, okay, we're going to send them to the 2-year program. I believe that Javier Campo from Cal Club did that recently and went to Rutgers in the 2-year program because the club believed in him and Thomas Bastis believed in him. And so they did that. So I hope we see more of that with a combination of coaching, online education, and 2-year program, because I think that's the future.
Yeah, I mean, that's a unique situation, but you hit on a couple of things. I mean, we've got to find other streams of labor. I mean, certainly, and thank God, we're bringing in many more women into the industry. And I think you saw all the stuff that went on at the Women's Open, which I thought was phenomenal.
Awesome. Kudos to Troy. And
Troy was great. I mean, it was actually tear-jerking. I was fortunate enough to interview a couple of the young ladies that went in there, and it was just great. I interviewed a bunch of them, and to a T, they all said it was the greatest experience they've ever had. But it's such a great resource. I mean, here's an opportunity to bring in, a labor pool that may not have been conventional or traditional, but they're some of the hardest working people on the course. I mean, to a T, Kevin Hicks, had Jenna. And, everybody that I've talked to, Matt and Mullenbrook, same thing. He says, look, these are the hardest working people on the crew. And thank God they're there, because the guys are trying to keep up with them. Right. We've got to find other streams of labor sources in this industry. Here's a weird one, Pat, and I'll share this only because I think it's so bizarre. A lot of clubs I talk to are having a hard time getting people because they can't pass drug tests because of marijuana.
Yeah, they need to just throw the drug testing thing out the window. I know it's required by insurance, but screw that.
Yeah, I mean this, and I can't tell you how many superintendents I've had that conversation with, and to a T, they've all said, look, it's one thing if these kids are all wired out, but if a kid comes to my course stoned, I'm going to know it, and I'm going to send his ass home. If he does it again, I'm going to fire him. I mean, but as long, if he can, if he's,
but you can't throw out 60% of your candidates.
Right, exactly.
Pass a drug test.
We have the same battle, quite honestly. I mean, we talked a little bit about this, but getting truck drivers, because of this scenario, because, you sit at home Saturday night, you smoke a joint and then you go to work on Monday. It's not like you're stoned on Monday morning, but it's still in your blood. You sit at home Saturday night, you drink a case of beer or two, and you passed out all day Sunday. you get up in the morning and you drive. But, I mean, but these are some of the weird things that are going on. And, again, like I said, in so many communities, guys are competing with McDonald's at $20 an hour, and when they can sit in air conditioning and get hamburgers for free.
So let's talk about how they're doing that. And one of the people I work a little bit with is Tyler Bloom.
And we've had on the Earthworks podcast.
Yeah, right. So and Tyler very much is he's doing a lot of different stuff, but he's very much pushing the notion of apprenticeship again.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And when we think of apprenticeship, we kind of think, okay, I'll hire an assistant and I'll train him, blah, blah, blah. This is more than that. These are programs in many cases that have funding behind them from states or counties or different kinds of programs, not-for-profit programs, where they'll underwrite the cost of these employees, but mostly what they'll do is they'll direct those employees, potential employees, to you, because you've educated them about what golf is and what these opportunities are and everything else. So in many cases, Tyler was the first person to reach out to these organizations and say, have you ever thought about golf courses, right? And so the maintenance side of that is just one part. He's also trying to help clubs find food and bev employees, chefs, and all that stuff.
I've known Tyler for a while, and I love what he's doing. In fact, I don't even remember where I was, but somewhere just recently, superintendent said, I even got a guy from Tyler. And so it's definitely starting to make a change. And I know what he's done down in Maryland. And I think that's a model that could easily go across the country and should go across the country. And
he's working with the folks in the Philadelphia chapter as well. So you're seeing that, I think, growth of that concept of a true apprenticeship again, which is, everything old is new again. It's
everything goodness, right?
We're reaching back to the 20s.
Does that mean we're new?
Yeah. So there's all sorts of stuff going on. And so, so you've got things like Tyler's program, apprenticeship. Yeah. You've got people reaching out to more and more retirees, boomers, who are uber reliable. They show up. In many cases, the ones that I think have been most successful are ones that have a specific duty every day. Your job is to go mow these tee boxes. Your job is to go clean trash cans every single day. And they just show up. They don't need any supervision. They do their thing. They go home. They get paid X and they play free golf. So boomers, for sure. I think we've seen a return back to using students again. Because for a long time, everybody was like, I don't want students because they're going to leave August 15th. Well, that's all you get. So I think we did see a lot of people using students again, particularly high school and college kids. I know many clubs where they used to have a rule against employing the children of members, and they've changed that. It comes with a little bit of baggage, but at least it's an option, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully at some point they'll do something about.
Let me tell you this. We interviewed, and I think Mike Kozak, who is an icon out on the West Coast, and I've known for years and love the guy. We interviewed him here, and I think I told the story on that podcast, but I happened to be in Florida, and I was with a sales rep of ours, and we're going around seeing guys. I run into his superintendent who I hadn't met, and he goes, I just hired some old guy from California. He said he was a superintendent. And I go, like, really? Northern California? You're like, I know everybody from Northern. So he pulls out this resume, and looking at him like, Mike Kozak? I mean, this is the Paul Lacho of the West Coast. I mean, you have any idea who this guy is? He goes, no, who is he? Who is he? And one of his first concerns was, is this guy gonna, try to take my job? I'm like, no, I promise you that Mike doesn't want your job. Mike, as Mike has kind of gone to retirement mode. He's traveling around in an RV, and he likes stopping at golf courses, and he loves being there when the sun rises, smelling the grass. I mean, that's what his passion is. And he just wanted to do something to stay active, stay on a golf course, and get some free rounds so he could play some golf.
That's like having Paul Latshaw mowing fairways.
That's what I was saying. I said, so we should have this whole team, Paul and Armin Sooney and all, you could list 100 guys that could be ideal, guys for this little thing. But, as it turned out, they became very close friends. He became a mentor. And Mike didn't stay long. He said he was going to only be there for a few months, and it worked out really, really well. Mike got what he wanted out of it. But the best part of it was, and I think I told the story, is that their crew wears jumpsuits. And I said to him, are you going to give Mike a jumpsuit? I said, I'll give you $1,000 if you get me a picture of Mike Kozak in a jumpsuit that says Mike on it. I never got the picture, but I think that's a resource that a lot of guys in this industry, would be happy to do. I mean, I would be happy to do it. Not that I'm capable of doing, but, getting to that point in life where I just want to work a few days a week or a couple hours a day and get out there on the golf course and be productive. I think a lot of young guys do have that fear of an older guy coming in, taking over. But I've seen this a lot across my travels, is guys that have, for whatever reason, their job didn't work out, something happened, and they end up, falling in with a buddy or somebody down the road or something else as the first assistant. I mean, these guys had 10 years, 30 years experience as a super, and it's become a wonderful team. The continuity between the current super and this former super, who is now the lead assistant. I mean, think about it. It's two really qualified guys, and the second guy is like, no, I get it. I've been there. I just want to do this job. And the other thing that's interesting is the concept, and I think you should address this, the concept of the career assistant. Before it was always, I'm going to bring an assistant and we're going to train him, work him hard, work him to death, and he's going to become the next guy down the road. I think that's changing too. And guys are very happy about, I'll be a career assistant. I'll make, 80, 90, 100 grand or whatever it is, have my benefits and not have the high pressure of the superintendent's job. I think that's changing a lot too.
I think you're right. And part of it is because superintendents are tired of the churn. Right. Yeah. So I've talked to a lot of superintendents who previously were part of that. I'm going to be a mentor and I'm going to have them for 3 years. I'm going to train them up and kick them out the door. And those same people are now saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm going to find one that'll stay here because I'm tired of this.
Yeah. And I have tremendous respect. I've interviewed a dozen guys already that have been huge mentors, and what a great thing for the industry. But I think that's changing. Like you just said, I think a lot of, first of all, it's so hard to get an assistant or even anybody, a crew guy. But I think, and I think on both sides, the assistants are saying, yeah, I don't even want his job. I just want to do what I'm doing and go home and not think about it.
There's always been those folks out there. And I really do think that some of what we're talking about with this apprenticeship programs, it's gonna create quite a few of those career assistants, because the one thing you maybe can't teach is communication skills. Not everybody is that adept as a communicator, sitting down and talking to a board of directors or an owner or giving a budget presentation. That's very scary for some people. And so they draw the line at that. So I think some of these people that are non-traditional candidates that are working their way up will probably be perfect in that mode.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. And this is one of those things that you've really been an icon for in this industry. But this is an industry that doesn't get corporate training like those of us that had spent some time in corporate America. We don't get trained on those skills. We learn how to grow grass. We learn what to spray. We learn what the equipment looks like and how to maintain it. But we don't learn how to manage people, and we don't vet for that. There's some companies that you and I have worked with that we know and love that have done a great job of bringing people like a Pat Jones to a seminar and talk about leadership skills. Our dear friends Tom Irwin up in New England, they have our leadership program every year, and it's so sales good. Training it's phenomenal. And this is one of those things. I mean, I was fortunate. You and I got to know each other a lot through ITOTA, the Independent Turf and Ornamentals Distributors Association, and they brought training to those of us that were distributors and manufacturers. And these were trainings that we would never have gotten if we were just running loose in the turf industry. And that's something I think a lot of our industry lacks, is we don't have the avenues by which we can get folks trained on basic, culture, leadership, things of that nature. And I don't know if that's changing or not. I mean, you know that better than I do.
I think the ones that are changing are the ones that are self-educated, it's funny because periodically there'll be a big Twitter discussion about which books do you read and blah, blah, blah. Right. I'm always shocked at how a few people have read Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Right. Which is right there, by the way. Exactly.
Or Good to Great.
Yeah.
Or The World is Flat.
Seven hats,
go back way back, Dale Carnegie,
the Simon Sinek, start with the why.
So when you read those books, and I highly recommend that to anybody who's listening that hasn't gone through those, when you read those books, you teach yourself stuff about business topics and about culture and everything else, and largely with close something there, largely with the salesmanship part of what you're doing. You're completely unprepared for that. So those books are going to teach you how to manage your time better and how to talk to people and how to build networks. Networking's so important in this business. And most people it's a dirty word. I don't want to do that. Blah, blah, I don't want to network. I don't want to be a shooter.
Yeah, that's not fair. That's not fair. That's how life works.
You shouldn't have to do that. But bottom line is, when you've read those books, then you can have an intelligent conversation with your boss, with the president of the club, who's a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer,
or a salesman or a business owner, that all go through these things. And that's who you have to relate to. And
so when you drop something in a conversation, you say, well, you know what Dale Carnegie said about this, they're going to look at you with a different set of eyes. So I can't recommend that stuff highly enough. The self-education part of what we do, and don't even get me started on TED Talks, because there's a lot of those.
I'll get started. Go ahead.
No, I mean, you mentioned
Simon Sinek,
and he's as good as it gets. So, but you don't have to constantly be eating these books, but try to make a list of 10 books about business or about managing yourself or about improving yourself that you want to read, and read them. I'm always shocked at how young people have read a hardback book in years.
No, and I don't mean that to be critical, of anybody, but
I do. I'm being critical. You should read books.
Reading is fundamental, for God's sake.
That's right.
The Simon Sinek one is one of my favorites, because it really talks about a subject matter of engaging a crew, a team, a company, and that's one of the biggest challenges of a lot of young superintendents, is how do I get my team to all understand that, we're doing this for a bigger good. I mean, first of all, understand that what you're managing is this big open space that is, as you heard earlier, it's carbon sequestration. I mean, we're capturing carbon. I mean, we're doing wonderful things for our communities, but we're also, trying to provide the best experience for our guests, and just understanding why, as a crew kid or as an assistant, what are we here for? Am I here just to make a buck, or is really there a bigger picture? And that's one of the simplest things, and that's what Simon Sinek talks about in Starting with the Why, as well as anything. But it's also this fear of this word of salesman. They fear that, I don't want to come off like a salesman. But everybody, I don't care who you are, you're the crew kid, you're a salesman. You're selling yourself to your members or to your boss. The superintendent is selling himself to the dentist who's on the Greens Committee, and the lawyers who are on the Greens Committee, and the business owners. I mean, you're always selling something. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a bag of chicken poop, or it could be yourself. You're selling something, and to understand and not be afraid of that, I think, is critical in our industry. And unfortunately, I still wish there were more outlets. I mean, I was kind of hoping that GCSAA would really take that leadership role, and it's kind of fallen off. And I don't mean that to be critical. And they have meetings, they have seminars, and they do things, but that single topic, I think, is as critical as anything in getting this whole industry to be better recognized.
Right. You make a great point, is connecting those workers to the greater good. What are we trying to do here? And making them feel like they're invested in that. And that really, it's all team building. It's all team building, coaching. And something that our friend Dean Graves talked about a lot.
Who's been on the Orthodox podcast? They've all been here.
I noticed that I hadn't been on until.
You're on. Okay. You've always been on. We just hadn't gotten down to the J's yet.
But Dean Graves, who one of the legends, right?
One of the legends.
Dean made it pretty simple. He said, you get to know your employees as people. You care about them. You talk to them as people. They're not just people who show up and you can move them around and have them do tasks. They're human beings. And I would strongly advise anybody who hasn't read it. There was an article in the GCI Turf Heads Takeover issue about 4 years ago in December that Dean wrote. and it's spectacular.
Yeah.
It's as good as you're going to find. So,
or better yet, listen to him on our podcast. He actually talked about us. Sorry, cheap plug. But he talked about an incident that he had when he was young, and he kind of snapped on a guy, and he went home. And I've known Dean for a long time and have the utmost of respect. He's the true gentleman of this industry. But he told the story, and it was heart-wrenching to me, where he kind of snapped on a kid, and when he was young as a first assistant, and he went home and he realized, man, that was that was on me, that wasn't him, and it changed him. And and that's something that everybody should hear, because and any business, anybody that knows anything about running the business, the most valuable aspect, most valuable piece of asset you have is the team that is working for you. And we're fortunate here. We've got such a great team, and we've tried hard to build a culture, and that's something that a golf course needs. They need to be able to have a culture and a family. Some of the best ones, our friend John Chassard, who's been, his guys have been with him for 30 some years. And John's a doofus. I mean, I'll be the first to tell him that. And he's been on the podcast. He's one of my better friends, but sorry, John, I didn't mean that. But he's got such a great culture. The guys, it's a family, and that's, you don't see it everywhere, but where you see it, it just strikes home when you see that on a golf course property.
Yeah, it flies in the face of this issue of, well, we can't hire enough bodies.
Yeah,
don't hire bodies.
don't hire bodies. Thank you for saying that.
So yeah, hopefully we're going to get better at that, because I think we're going to get forced to. But so I'll sum this up. You said at the beginning that most people were down 40% from what. Yeah. I think it's less. I think it's less than that. I think most clubs are probably, or most maintenance staffs are probably half what they should be. Wow. Right. And in many cases, they're half of what they're budgeted to be. It used to be they didn't have enough budget to hire the people they needed, and now they don't have enough people to spend the budget that they have.
Yeah,
which is
exactly.
Crazy, right.
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
Bottom line is that smaller, more professional, better bonded team of people to replace throwing bodies and stuff. That's the future.
Well, the other thing that scenario does is it draws more people to you, because people want to work in an environment like that. So if your environment is one in which, people want to work in an environment like that. I mean, how many times have you been around talking to a superintendent and said, yeah, I went to school to be a lawyer, but, I went out and, I took a summer job working for Bob at the golf course, and I love being outside. I mean, that's why we're doing this, because we don't want to be a lawyer. I mean, my dad did that. He went from, law school into television production, a la Pat Jones, and just couldn't imagine being a lawyer or anything, but just the fact that these guys can be outside every single day. I mean, some days that's horrible, when it's 90 degrees out or 100 and some degrees out, but for the most part, it's a lifestyle job. And if you can make it fun, make it family, bring a culture to the golf course, and you're going to recruit people by just saying, come and meet us, come and meet my team, join us.
Well, so speaking of which, so I think we as an industry as a golf community are doing some things that are really good. I think First Tee is a great way that's exposing kids to golf in general. The First Green program that GCSAA has, and it's still kind of being developed or whatever, that's brilliant, because you're bringing kids to a golf course, and the first thing they're going to learn about is the golf course as an ecosystem.
Yeah.
Place as a big living, breathing thing, not
biology.
Something that's behind gates with rich people and scorecards
exactly.
and clubs that cost $1,000.
Yeah.
No, it's butterflies and bees and grass,
and foxes and deer and
foxes in the bunkers and stuff. So absolutely.
Well.
So I have great hopes for things like that. And I also have great hopes for things like the USGA LPGA girls golf program.
Yes,
which is
absolutely.
A fabulous way to bring young women into the profession.
Absolutely.
And by the way, going back to your point about young women in the profession, we all need to thank Canada for this, because the Canadian culture and the Canadian structure of the way they do things generated a lot more female participation than we ever have here. And a lot of those women have been leaders then in this effort to try to bring more opportunities for women. And I think they deserve a lot of credit. The only explanation for that I've ever heard, as I kept asking people, why is it that you have more female assistants and superintendents here? And bottom line, it came down to they have a more rigorous pesticide examination in Canada, a lot more rigorous, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh,
that's interesting.
You're certified IPM technician in Canada. You gotta pass some tests, and the women tended to be better at it, right?
There you go.
Because they're smarter than we are.
Exactly, and there's no question about that. There's no question about that. Let's talk. We don't have a lot of time left, but I want to get into, lots of changes have happened since COVID in our industry, in the sports turf industry. Sports turf was all but shut down for a better part of a year, but really golf exploded. I mean, I tell this story often when COVID hit, Kevin Hicks and I were out in Denver seeing our friend Dave Wilbur, and I got on a plane, flew home, and now this word COVID was everywhere. And I remember I'm flying home, sitting next to this guy that was working for the DOD, traveling all over the world, and he's breathing all over me. I'm like, oh, this is horrible. I'm going to be dead tomorrow. Yeah. And in fact, we came back from the National in Orlando that year, and Lisa, our vice president, she was out for 2 weeks with COVID. Mm-hmm. But we got to, as a business, I basically pulled everybody off the road because I'm going to protect our team. And we thought it was going to be a few weeks. And we were also petrified that this could just end the business, And then what happened was the golf thing started to explode. Yeah. And people were coming out, and it's changed a lot of things. There's a number of questions in this track here, Pat, but one of them is, can we maintain the great momentum that we started with COVID in golf?
Some of it, if we play our cards right. You and I have been through golf booms before, and they don't end well, right? And here's why. Because golf courses are generally managed by people who don't understand hospitality very well. And so when Tiger came along, and all of a sudden we had a couple of million non-traditional people wanting to play golf, people of color, young people, and they walked into pro shops in a lot of places, and they were greeted by somebody standing behind a desk going, why are you here? Are you good enough to play our golf course? So
do you know the rules? Do you have the right shoes?
It was crap. And that was, so we managed to turn away millions of young people that might have been interested in
it as an elitist sport.
Yeah, exactly.
And it shouldn't be.
So hopefully we don't make that mistake this time, because what we had was a whole bunch of people who came back to golf, who tried it once along the way. We had a lot of kids where this was a time for them to bond with mom and dad on the golf course. And we had a lot of people walking, exercise, which I think is very much key to the future of how golf is perceived and everything else that and I am finally out of the business of selling advertising. And so I can say this, and I love my friends in the golf cart business, but golf carts suck. They send the wrong message about what golf's supposed to be. Golf's supposed to be exercise and a pastime and a way to be outside, not a way to sit in the cart, which basically is a giant cup.
But where are you going to put your beer?
Exactly. But I'm optimistic to see more and more people walking now, and I heard that from a lot of superintendents. So
clubs are encouraging it. I mean, it's really getting.
So I'm encouraged. Can we maintain the boom? Only if we invest. Only if you can't just sit there and say, well, the boom's going to take care of us forever and COVID saved golf. That's bogus. And I wrote something about this a year and a half ago. COVID didn't save golf. Superintendents saved golf.
Superintendents always save golf.
They showed up and did their job just like they always do, despite the risks. They showed up and did it. And a team of 2 or 3 people kept golf courses alive all over the country.
And a lot of them for those first months were closed, and they still showed up every day with the risk. A lot of us were sitting at home because of COVID. They're out working, doing their thing with a crew, maybe a small crew.
And sterilizing equipment and flag sticks and inventing ways to allow people to be safe and things like that. That was all creativity and all sort of effort done by superintendents that, again, they won't ever get the credit for. But we're coming out of this now with more interest And certainly there's still kind of a bubble this summer, although the weather wasn't as good this year.
Not on the East Coast.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who gave COVID all this credit for saving golf last year kind of forgot that it was a great weather year.
It was a great weather year.
Now we've had a not so good weather year, and rounds are still ahead of 2020. Of 2019.
Yeah.
But not like it was last summer when it was the bright shiny object that it was the only game in town. So that's changed a little bit, but it's up to each facility, it's not up to the USGA or the GCSAA, the PGA Tour, God forbid the PGA Tour. It's up to each individual facility to grow the game, to keep those people, to make them feel welcome, to offer, women kind of low impact opportunities to start the game. It can be very, very intimidating to walk onto the tee box at a golf course, right? Yeah. If you're not comfortable doing it. And I think a lot of people just back away from that. So I think we're doing some things right, but it's really up to each individual club to commit to doing things to grow the game at their level. Girls golf, programs for women, programs for non-traditional players, whatever it might be. So we've got to take responsibility of that, and not just, as I suspect too many courses are doing, just assuming that this is going to continue forever.
This is great. Let's keep going.
Just like we did when Tiger showed up.
Yeah.
And like I said, booms just don't work well because they bust.
Yeah, exactly. Will there ever be another Tiger boom?
Oh, like sure. That? Sure.
We'll have another Tiger that will bring everybody out to the golf course.
You know who the first Tiger was? You know who the first Tiger was? Francis Wilmette, right?
Oh, there you go.
Or whatever it was when he won the U.S. Open at Brookline.
Well, look at Army's, Arnie's Army. I mean, those videos of the 60s.
So when you look at the history of golf, there's always been these peaks and valleys, right? Palmer and Eisenhower coincided with Levittown, a place you're very familiar with. Yeah. So the suburbanization of America, but unfortunately, that's also what got real estate interested in golf. Right. Was this whole idea. And then we went through a decade in the 90s, and it really started in the 80s, where every real estate development in the country had a golf course, right? And they had Fazio or Dye or whatever. And we built 5,000 golf courses that we didn't really need the capacity.
Right, yeah. Well, look at Myrtle Beach, for example. I mean, it's been crumbling ever since that boom.
Myrtle Beach is a great example. That was the beginning, by the way, of the golf bust following the great Tiger boom. Was in 2001. We had obviously the tech bubble burst in the stock market, and then came along 9/11. But most importantly, the Wall Street Journal ran an article basically saying banks were done lending money to golf courses in Myrtle Beach because there were way too many of them, and it was stupid.
Yeah.
And everybody was like, ooh, so every bank in America read that article and said, oh, we're going to back off of this stuff. And that was the end. That was the end of the great construction boom. We went from 450 courses a year down to whatever we're at now, a dozen.
Can I get you back on this program once or two? I think we could spend another hour. If you, of course, you can't, but that's all right. But I'd love to have you back. This was, I've always enjoyed talking with you. Seriously, how many selfies do you have?
About 4,000.
4,000 selfies. Talk about ego.
It works out great because sooner or later those people are going to die, and then
you'll sell them for a lot of money.
Maybe
you'll get out of your basement if you can sell a few of them.
By the way, this is the one complaint I have about my job and my life at this point is that I've been writing way too many obituaries for our old.
Oh, I know.
So here's my message to all of you: stop dying. I'm tired of it. Don't want to write any more obituaries, right?
So let's end on this question: who was the most impressive person you've met in this industry? Be it professional, turf. It doesn't even have to be a turf guy, but you've met a lot of people in your years.
Wow, that's a really.
I know you tell the great story of Arnie Palmer in the bathroom. That's one of my
Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer is an amazing an amazing human being. God, I can't even believe he's still gone. But I'm gonna go with this. I'm gonna go with Eb Steiniger from Pine Valley. So Eb was the old days personified, right? And so meeting him and listening to him. And help. He explained to me a lot about how the internal workings of the best private clubs in the country work, and the privacy stuff and everything else. So Eb was really
great name.
Yeah, and just an unbelievable guy. And by the time I met him, he was blind, but he was still driving his golf cart around Pine Valley. Now that's knowing your facility.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
So no,
I had the privilege many years ago as well, and I was overwhelmed by and it was a very brief meeting, but yeah, it was great. Pat, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done over all these years for me personally, for my company, for all the people in the turf industry. I hope you continue to do this for a long time. I hope we can get back to a place where we can actually hang out and have a beer again.
Oh, we're doing that. We're getting there. I think there's going to be a golf show this spring. I think there's going to be one. Yeah. There's definitely going to be one in Myrtle Beach and some other places.
Yeah. So next time we talk, we should talk about the trade show world. But yeah, I think I'll be in Myrtle Beach, so hopefully I'll see you there. Okay. And I'll certainly be in San Diego in February for the Nationals. So thank you so much for your time and everything you've done.
Joel, thank you, and thank you for educating half the world about soils. And we could talk about this all day too.
Yeah, let's do that someday.
Yeah, but seriously, no,
I mean, piss off a lot of people doing that. That'd be good.
You think about how many hours you've invested educating people about soil, and nobody else has done that, and you should be congratulated for that.
Oh, thank you.
And it was
my team.
It was a joy to listen to your speech about the first 3 times, and after that, it was like, okay.
Yeah, right. You and I've been on the road show together too many times, and I'm still doing the same bloody speech. But one of these days, I'll change it up. We've mixed it up a little bit more and more and more. But Pat, thanks so much. I appreciate all your time and all you've done for everybody in the world. And that is the Earthworks podcast. And if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe and watch the Turf Talks as well, little 2-minute snippets of information. And we'll be back again next week with somebody probably a lot more interesting than Mr. Jones here. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Joel.